All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Regional and Urban Design Forum. We do a monthly program, and you have found it. It's the first Thursday of every month. My name is Brian Stryzik, and I am the co-chair along with Jay Castle and Tyler Kobick. And we just really try to have a great discussion about urban design in the East Bay. And I'm happy that you all are here to contribute. And please, please be vocal. Please participate in the conversations and use the chats liberally. Started a few announcements. Our co-chair here at RUD, Tyler Kobick, has joined the AIA East Bay Board of Directors, so congratulations to him. Oh yeah, he is here. It'll be fun to work with him on the board level. A local firm of CMG in collaboration with Jensen Architects won an AIA National Award for Willy Woo Wong Playground in SF Chinatown. Super interesting project, amazing section that goes there that has to deal with these grades that are typical in San Francisco, and just it's really a fun thing. I'd recommend taking a field trip over there and seeing that. There's a resilience playbook series by the Greenbelt Alliance, and they're putting on a whole series of programs. And on February 22nd, they have a program called Housing Policy Equals Climate Policy, which should be really interesting. And I think the rest of the series will be great too. The last announcement we have is the Open House New York has a program titled Libraries for the 21st Century, Design Standards for a Modern Carnegie Library. So the Carnegie Library there's lots of small ones around throughout the Bay Area. So I think it could be really interesting. This is on February 15th. And if you missed our presentation last June called Oakland Public Library Surviving in the Pandemic, please check out our website at the AIA East Bay and watch that, and some interesting things about what's going on in our cities. I'm going to hand it over to Jay Castle to introduce tonight's program. Thanks for all.
Actually, I think first Tyler has one more announcement he's going to pop into here.
Hey everybody, Tyler Kobick, and I'm going to do one measly little announcement today, but it's an important one because it kind of codifies a little bit about what this is tonight. And it's actually our first official in-person, I think, gathering for quite a while with AIA, which is a joint lecture that we sponsor every year with UC Berkeley. And it helps fund programming and scholarship programs. And it is a dinner and then talk with Sandra Barclay and Jean-Pierre Cruzet, co-founders of Barclay and Cruzet Architecture. And this year it's on March 2nd, 2022. So please look into that and sign up and attend. It's usually a fun event and great food and a good time to help us sponsor some scholarship programs and our yearly event that we cross-coordinate with UC Berkeley's architecture program.
Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, and before we begin with tonight's program, I just wanted to reiterate congratulations to Tyler on becoming on the board of directors this year, and also to Brian, who was voted president. So I don't know about y'all, but I'm going to be calling him Mr. President from now on.
El Presidente, I prefer.
Got it. El Presidente, it is. Okay, and we are throwing some links to some of these announcements in the chat if you want to take a look. So tonight, we are happy to welcome 3 students from UC Berkeley that have formed under the banner of Telegraph for People, which is a kind of a student-led effort to reimagine Upper Telegraph Avenue near the Cal campus. The presenters we have tonight, Sam Greenberg is a co-founder of Telegraph for People and an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, majoring in urban studies and political economy. Brandon Young, another co-founder, is an undergraduate senior at UC Berkeley in urban studies and public policy. And then Mackenzie Deep is a student, she's a freshman, I think, at UC Berkeley, double majoring in urban studies and economics, and minoring in public policy. And tonight they're going to present their efforts to develop a different option for Upper Telegraph Avenue than is being considered currently by the city. And with that, I think I'll hand it over to Sam.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So let's get started here. First, I kind of want to go over some history of, the context for all of this, why this is the time that we're kind of uniting around a banner as students right now, and the general, current conditions in the project area that we're working with. So first of all, right now, the city is basically redesigning a couple of streets on the south side of campus, in the Southside Neighborhood, under the Southside Complete Streets Project. So this is a federally funded project that began in last summer. A lot of the outreach took place last fall. And basically, massive public outreach for this project. And the timeline for the grant is very tight. So a lot of this is happening really quickly. And we've been kind of tossed into all of this on a very tight time schedule. This is not something that's happening over the course of many, many years. This has all really happened, outreach wise, in the last 3 or so months. So the streets involved, we're going to talk about Telegraph today, but the city's also going to be doing complete streets rebuilds for Bancroft, which is going to get a bus lane and a cycle track, Fulton, which is going to get a cycle track, and Dana, which is, part of an AC Transit pilot project, is going to get a cycle track and a bus lane, or bus boarding islands, which is exciting. So first of all, let's just look at Southside. What are we dealing with here? So, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Southside neighborhood. This is kind of technically what that neighborhood is. It's basically the south side of campus in Berkeley. It is the densest neighborhood in Berkeley. It is basically home to most freshmen and a lot of other students. Like, this is the core of where students live around UC Berkeley, and it kind of centers around Telegraph. Wait, there we go. Okay, sorry, my slides weren't working. The UC Berkeley is also the largest node on the AC Transit network, from what I understand. So lots and lots of lines converge here. Down Telegraph, you'll see that the 6th line goes down there. Let me see. Am I able to? Not sure where if I have tools for, so you can see my cursor. Never mind. But you can see the 6th line down Telegraph there. So this is a massive transit node. This is the density of Southside in relation to the rest of Berkeley. Southside is denser population-wise than downtown, and its density per square mile is 57,000 on the census tract that is directly below campus. Obviously, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison considering the amount of open space, but New York City, for example, is 27,000 people per square mile. Obviously, that varies massively, but the point is we're dealing with a very dense area here. And it's once again a very young area. This is where most students or most people living here are students. 90% are under 34. So this is kind of a historical image of what this area kind of looked like. You're looking north here, and as you can see, once again, I don't really have the tools as a presenter here, but you can see that Telegraph Avenue actually used to be a street. It used to be a road going into campus. Campus is kind of annexed a bunch of blocks. This is a map from 1917, but cars actually used to go down Telegraph Avenue. Sorry, my slides are, let me see. Okay, there we go. Yeah, cars used to go down Telegraph Avenue. It actually used to be a commercial strip. These are cars at Southside Gate, which is, as we know, it's a gate that happens to be decently inside of campus as we know it today. And that's because the street actually used to go up to it before. So the importance of that is, Telegraph kind of exists as the main artery through which students get to campus every day, especially underclassmen. And it is, we really think of it as an extension of Sproul Plaza. So, and then Brandon, if you want to take this slide quickly.
Yeah, so
Telegraph Avenue really forms the commercial spine through the primary student district, which connects the South Side to Elmwood and South Berkeley and pretty much the rest of the city and even the East Bay. You also have Bancroft, which is the street that flanks the campus park, which has a lot of businesses, as well as Durant, which is one street south of that. So Telegraph is really the central axis of this neighborhood and really joins everyone together.
Right. And I mean, looking here, the density of Southside is really massive in comparison to the rest of Berkeley. And once again, the population density is higher than even downtown Berkeley. And all of the units are here. The dorms are all in Southside. This is Durant, which is a street kind of known for two-sided double parking. This is kind of the urban fabric around here. It's very auto-oriented, even though, as you saw from the map before, this is a prototypical streetcar suburb. This is built around streetcars, and we've kind of shoved cars in here and shoved students onto increasingly small sidewalks over time to accommodate cars, even though we don't need to do so. And I think Durant's a great example of that and the problems with that. But this is kind of illustrative of Telegraph. You're seeing at the bottom, this is looking down Telegraph. This is just cars packed onto the street. And I don't know if you can see in the corners there, students just crowded onto the sidewalks. It really isn't a state of affairs that I think anybody's quite happy with. It's just everybody's so used to it that we just assume this is what Telegraph is, but we just don't think it needs to be the case.
So yeah, if you can go back a few images, I included these because I'm always torn when I introduce a neighborhood in a presentation just through, census tract data and plan views. And a big reason why I got really interested in planning is through photography. So I took these photos when I was writing a news piece on the city's plan to rezone Southside for Berkeley side. And I was standing on the roof of a parking garage taking photos, and I noticed from this sort of like orthogonal perspective just how many types of users, this is Durant Avenue, the street accommodates, from the post office truck to double parking cars who are delivery workers to students who contend with traffic all along the street, and just noticing like the texture of the street in the neighborhood, which has really informed our design philosophy. Next slide, Sam.
Yeah, so this is back to that slide here. God, for some reason my my slides are messing up. There we go. So this is the intersection of Channing and Telegraph. And as you can see, I mean, these are like urban streets. These are not suburban streets. The sidewalks are very narrow. These car lanes, by the way, I think on the Durant to Bancroft block, I think the car lanes, there are no loading zones on that block. I believe they are, if I can recall, there might actually be loading zones on one stretch. They're about 14 feet wide functionally. I mean, which enables double parking, but we're really dealing with like wider than highway width lanes. Highway width lanes are, 12 feet or so. And we're really giving all of this space to cars. And this is the second most pedestrian heavy stretch, these 4 blocks in the entire East Bay behind Oakland's Chinatown, which, as you know, is very pedestrian heavy. Here we go. For some reason, it keeps skipping 2 slides. I apologize about that. And Telegraph has a really vibrant public realm. We think it's just massively being stifled by the fact that there isn't much space for it. But Jesse has, you've probably seen this story in Berkeley side recently, has set up this kind of a collection of chess tables. And currently it's at Haste and Telegraph. But it's this transaction-free, like ultimate expression of the Telegraph's public realm. This is the kind of thing we want to foster. I mean, it's there right now. It's just there really is not much space for these transaction-free, interactions between people you'd normally never interact with. These seemingly mundane and interactions that make up what we know as the public realm. And it's just, I mean, I really, if you want to see what Telegraph's public realm is capable of being, stop by any day. I mean, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Telegraph. Yeah, I think you added this slide, Brandon. You want to take this one?
So what I think that one of the major reasons we wanted to get involved in this is because we were noticing as the City of Berkeley's Public Works Department was planning for what the street should look like. They, had this very classical, technocratic top-down view of how the street functioned. And as students who have lived in this neighborhood and have spent a lot of time there, we really wanted to bring much more on the ground perspective. And also one that really embodied the principles that Donald Appleyard wrote about. And he wrote that cities should imbue a sense of curiosity, nostalgia, and excitement as a crucible of a user experience. So, we're always sort of spending time and going out and making videos and taking pictures. And recently, you probably know the building at the intersection of Hayes and Telegraph was recently finished. And it's very controversial. Either people love it or they hate it. I happen to love it. And I think there is a right answer to that question. But one of the fantastic things about the building is it has this fake concrete rock on the outside. And I thought to myself, has no one tried climbing this stuff yet? So one day I took out a pad and put my climbing shoes on and just like climbed on the outside. And, thankfully, no one seemed to care. I was really surprised. I thought a security guard would come out, but that really speaks to the sort of vibrancy and unusual culture on Telegraph Avenue. Is I was like 12 foot high on this wall, and everyone was just walking by as if nothing unusual was happening.
Yeah, once again, just like this is a one of a kind street. And I think we all know, everybody really knows what Telegraph Avenue is. It's just there's this general perception that it's kind of been declining over years, over decades. And we think that the best way to fix that is to revitalize it and actually just give it back to people. And that's the people are what made Telegraph great in the first place. It's not the cars that we kind of, and we'll look at the circulation statistics on this as well. Actually right here. So these are the transit volumes each day on Telegraph. You can see that once again, massive node. Line 6 buses really do need to use Telegraph. So, I mean, throughout this whole process, we've had this, this competing interest in either rerouting the bus up to Bowditch, which is the street to the east of Telegraph, and just having a full pedestrian plaza, or trying to figure out how to accommodate Line 6 buses. And in the end, we're very, very confident in leaving Line 6 buses on the street and accommodating them, because this is just such an important line. I mean, this was one of the most important, streetcar lines back in the day, and it still functions that way now. And we want to, set this street up for some future bus rapid transit situation. One would hope. And Bowditch, we've actually looked at some of the data from AC Transit, and it looked like the reroute times on during the Telegraph Grateful Day Fest were just kind of prohibitive. It actually increased them substantially. The time it took for the Line 6 buses to kind of get to Bancroft from Dwight. So we're not interested in that anymore. We're fully interested in accommodating buses. And if you here, let me see. Here we go. And we have to recognize as well that UC Berkeley students are not driving to school. They are walking. They are taking transit. It is very rare for UC Berkeley students to drive to school, at least in comparison to other schools. But especially if they live close by. I mean, if you look at this, we're up to if you live within half a mile of campus, your drive alone percentage is down way in the single digits. And even students who come from 20 plus, miles away, most of them are taking transit or some other, I'd assume transit if you're going that far. But the point is here, student accessibility to campus by motor vehicle is not really of concern. There are, if students live far away and they need to drive to campus for whatever reason, there's so many other ways to access campus than driving down the most pedestrian heavy thoroughfare. Here, sorry. Here, I'm gonna actually quickly stop sharing and then reshare, because for some reason my Google Slides is skipping 2 slides whenever I go here. Let me try to do that quickly. All right. There we go. So student mode share, I mean, walking is up at 63%, which is massive. And 75% of undergraduates don't have access to a car. And this is just, if the street is supposed to be for students, I mean, we're accommodating cars on it at their expense. And I really just think that there should be 3 blocks in Berkeley that are car free. And if there should be these. I mean, this is what Telegraph looks like currently. I mean, you can see the scale of what we're talking about. We have 10-foot sidewalks, and the cars are just basically given almost the entire right of way. It is crazy. Once again, we're looking at 13-foot lanes here, which is just massive, totally off the walls. This is beyond what you'd even see on highways a lot of the time, and we're talking about an urban street. Pedestrians are given basically no space. Oh, God, sorry, this is happening again. And then this is you'll see this again later. This is a top view of just how much space is given to cars versus pedestrians. And I mean, yeah, this is a photo of the street as is. I mean, so like just a broader view. I mean, Telegraph for people, we walk this street constantly. We see this street every day. We're urban studies students, and we've I mean, seen from the start, like coming to campus, that this makes absolutely no sense that we've given all this space to cars. So how did this kind of start? I mean, basically this initially started, Brandon asked me, I was giving a public comment to Transportation Commission on behalf of the Berkeley Urban Studies Student Association. And Brandon asked me, oh, wait, I mean, this all of the Southside Complete Streets Project is happening right now. What about starting an organization to fight for a car-free telegraph? And, I was kind of startled for a moment, and then I thought, wait, this is kind of a great opportunity to do so. So the way we're thinking of this is basically just a window of opportunity to get students involved. And I guess our initial obstacles that we identified were, I mean, first of all, 12 years ago, merchants were highly opposed to even putting a bus lane on Telegraph. And they actually are today as well, which is highly disappointing. And we knew that was going to be a large obstacle. We also identified student inaction as a potential large obstacle. Students aren't deeply involved in Berkeley politics. I think compared to the amount of students, I think it's a quarter of the population in Berkeley is students, yet you really rarely will see students at those numbers at public meetings. But so our strategy was basically just to get as many students from as many departments involved as possible. Students walk this street you're looking at every day. They walk the sidewalks. Everybody's going to class at the same time. Cars are given the whole right of way. It just feels unjust. So we were optimistic that if enough energy was put into this, that we could get lots of students on board. And I mean, sure enough, at the and this is within a 2-week window of organizing, really 1 week for this first public meeting, the Transportation Commission meeting in November of 2021, when they were initially getting a presentation, given a presentation from planners on the project. There's a massive turnout, lots of representatives from different student orgs like Cal Dems and other orgs, and just massive support for a car-free telegraph, both from students and from commissioners. And the commission basically, I mean, they didn't vote at that point. They gave basically unanimous support for a car-free telegraph. Then you get to the most important event, I think, in this whole process, which was the open house in November, which was an open house hosted by the planners. And there was just massive public support at that point for a car-free telegraph, beyond what the planners had ever imagined. And we basically just completely turned the table from 10 years ago, where rather than tons of merchants coming out to protest even adding a bus lane on this massive transit corridor, is students coming out demanding even more than what's being proposed. What is being proposed? If you, one second, sorry. This is the Telegraph Public Realm Plan. This is from 2016. I believe this is basically a plan that you might be familiar with. And that's basically what the project that the Southside Complete Streets Project is kind of aiming to do. It's basically putting everything on sidewalk level. And I mean, cars are still allowed kind of on this shared street design. However, I mean, it's basically making everything flush. And the option, this is the cross section of what planners have selected as the preferred alternative, option 4. I mean, and this is an adaptation to the Telegraph Public Realm Plan. which, I mean, we're really excited, and we're urging council to move forward and approve all of the preferred alternatives, because once again, this grant funding is a very tight timeline. However, I mean, throughout this whole process, we've still thought that this isn't quite enough. There are ways to accommodate loading and business needs without letting cars drive on this highly pedestrianized segment. And we think it's worth making at least one space in our city car free. Anyway, more recently, we've had massive turnout at the recent open house in January. Still just once again, the tides have basically completely turned. So our strategy of turning lots of students out and getting them involved has basically worked out. We're really happy with where we're at. And even though, I mean, we'll discuss kind of some takeaways from this whole process, and Brandon will present the design that we're going with basically as our proposed design. But basically at this point, bureaucratically, our barriers are that the project needs to move forward very quickly. So even if everybody really wants to have a car-free telegraph implemented on the Southside Complete Streets Project, which not everybody does, but vast majority of the Transportation Commission has recommended it to council. It technically cannot happen within the Southside Complete Streets Project. But basically what we're urging is, first, once again, for council to get all of the preferred alternatives on this project through, but also secondarily and technically separate from the project, to tell Public Works to build out a car-free telegraph, design and engineer a car-free telegraph that kind of be built on top of the option 4 you're looking at there, which the Telegraph Public Realm Plan that I showed here. It is configurable, and this is what we're kind of building out, all sidewalk level. It's configurable in many different ways, and we think that configuration should happen sooner rather than later is basically where we're at. So that kind of brings us to, something that happens kind of midway through this process is we wanted to get students energized. So we decided to launch a design competition. And the prize was a $150 Rice and Bones gift card, which is the restaurant at Bauer Worcester Hall, which is where CED students spend a lot of their time. So we put these posters up around Worcester. Sorry about these slides. And we ended up getting some submissions, and we have with us today Mackenzie Deep with the winning submission to our design competition, which we were really excited about because we thought it took all of the goals of Telegraph for People, which is bringing back a strong public realm, just giving space back to pedestrians and prioritizing transit riders. It puts those all into practice in this one really interesting biophilic plan that we definitely looked to when we were designing our option 5 to present, which Brandon will talk about after that. So Mackenzie, you can take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, so Telegraph for People, just to reiterate, is doing such wonderful work already, and I'm really glad to be part of it and being part of this discussion. So I just wanted to walk you through my thought process before going into the design. A little bit about me. I'm originally from the Bay Area, so I'm from San Jose, just an hour away. But even just being an hour away, I had a very different experience with public transportation and walkable streets. For me, San Jose, everything is kind of further apart, and everyone drives a car. So I got my license as soon as I could, and I was driving because the public transportation was not very effective or reliable. So that was definitely something I was focusing on when thinking about what I wanted to include in the design. Another thing that I wanted to focus on is the sustainability aspect. I noticed when I first walked down Telegraph, there's not a lot of trees, not a lot of native plant, landscape around there. So I wanted to kind of address the sustainability portion of a design by incorporating more of a biophilic approach to the street, as well as looking at different materials to use and stuff like that. So this is an example of a community space. For reference, this is the street going right up to the campus. A notable feature of the design I want to point out is the use of shade. So basically I wanted to include a lot of awnings above the sidewalks just to provide more shade and protection from rain if we ever get any, and kind of enabling pedestrians to use the sidewalk more efficiently, as well as to provide more of a cozy feel to the city. And then as you can see above in the blue, shade sails can be placed above the sidewalk areas and the street area, and they can be changed out throughout the year to provide opportunities for cultural expression as well as serve as decoration. So this kind of also, you know, allows for Telegraph to become a more lively space. I know I'm definitely someone who's a fast walker, but this kind of allows people to slow down and really look around them when they're passing through. And then I also wanted to incorporate trees adjacent to the street just to provide more natural shade for from the canopy cover, and also incorporate some landscape. And then one other thing I wanted to point out is a diminished distinction between the sidewalk and road. So if you could head to the next slide. Yeah, so basically in my design, I decided to remove the traditional distinction between the sidewalk and the bike lane and the street, just to allow for the spaces to be shared and force the vehicles to slow down. So the street is more narrow and more separated and less separated from the sidewalk. That way the street is more of a pedestrian oriented space rather than a car oriented space. And just to, you know, since everything is on the same level, I wanted to put a pervious strip between the street and the bike lane just to provide a little more protection for cyclists and for the people riding scooters or skateboarders. So just adding a little more protection for them. And it also kind of serves this dual purpose. So native plants can be provided there. And then if you look on the left, basically any rain or pollution kind of filters down through the soil. And this kind of is a space that allows for pollinators and other, you know, parts of nature to come into the street. And then also one thing that I thought would be cool is the street lights with the pervious strip in the middle. The street lights are able to provide light for both sides of the street. And ideally this would be solar powered to save energy. And then on the side, I really was fascinated by one of my classes I took, making sure that buildings are able to have their own kind of community space in the sidewalk. So I wanted to provide public spaces of varying scales and sizes and just allow for a more diverse range of people to use the spaces in different ways. Since, you know, personally, I walk through the street probably 3 or 4 times a day, just commuting back and forth. And this space outside of the buildings can serve as a restaurant area, it can serve for small businesses, it can also serve as a gathering area or for farmers markets or for the people selling rings. And so this is a really good space to use for cultural activity as well as gathering in and being able to converse. And then the street can really be used as a canvas for expression as well as for, you know, just lingering. And then on the next slide, this is a street corner that I wanted to highlight. One thing I wanted to think about was mobility for pedestrians when, you know, kind of incorporating this street of Telegraph back into the rest of the other streets. So one thing I wanted to make sure is that pedestrians have kind of these shorter crossing distances. And one thing I wanted to implement is a curb extension at intersections. So this really creates shorter distances for pedestrians to walk across the street, and then therefore shorter wait times for our automobiles or for the buses. And then as well as improved safety, it just makes it so pedestrians have more visibility to drivers, and the narrow lanes kind of force vehicles like the buses to slow down. And then this extra space on the sidewalk area can be used as a green space or for tables. And then on the right side, I wanted to incorporate another sustainable design element. Permeable pavement kind of allows, the tiles are further apart, so there's an ability for any pollutants to trickle down through the sediment and then eventually be filtered out. And then the next slide, please. Okay, and then another thing I wanted to look at when designing Telegraph is just, the incorporation of buses and public transit. Obviously, this will be a main way of transportation through this street if you're not walking. And I wanted to make this inclusive and accessible for all communities. So this redesigned bus boarding island kind of to compensate for the narrower main street and the reduction of road access. This is directly aligned with the main street rather than pulling off into a shoulder. That way buses are able to board passengers without leaving the travel lane. And this allows the public transportation to move faster and more efficiently by shortening the time lost when merging in and out of traffic. And then I wanted to, go back, please. And the bus station itself, I wanted to make sure that all bus stations have benches and they have a shelter on top of them. That way this is accessible for people who need to sit when they're waiting, or people with disabilities or elderly people. And then to the next slide. Yeah, once again, just to reiterate, I wanted to make sure that there's a wider sidewalk. So, anyone feels comfortable in their own personal space, walking as slow or fast as they want. So it's really, again, a pedestrian oriented space. And then there's just one bus lane. There's no other lane. So they just stop at the bus station and then they continue. And then the pervious strip, and then the bike lane connected to the sidewalk. Can pass it over to Sam, I think.
No, passing it to Brandon, but thank you very much. And also, I love how the slides just work completely perfectly the second that you start presenting. All right, take it away, Brandon.
Yeah, thanks so much again, Mackenzie. It was so cool receiving submissions from other students and really being able to have students who use the street every day imagine what it could be like with, just free reign to be as utopian as possible with their designs. So these following designs, I drew up actually very much keeping in mind the logistical and political limitations in place in order to get cars off the road, but also still serve all the essential functions and users that the street needs to. So in order to answer that dilemma, our first counter proposal, so to speak, really sought to find a way to allow emergency vehicle egress and ingress while filtering out unnecessary private automobile traffic that would go, basically typical drivers who would be driving along Telegraph northbound from Dwight. So initially we thought that the city doesn't need to necessarily do anything too expensive, but really they just need to place bollards at the southern end of every single block. That way northbound through traffic wouldn't be able to go on Telegraph, whereas commercial loading vehicles could go onto a shared curbless street, pull in, and then leave. So the street section that would create would look something like what you see on the right, which would basically turn the whole street into a plaza, which would be really, really cool and kind of was our initial vision. But there were a lot of issues with that. So next slide. The biggest of which would be how to reroute the bus if we were basically asking AC Transit to get off of Telegraph because we wanted to see a pedestrian plaza. So in rewriting the bus, we thought that northbound AC Transit line 6, which is one of AC Transit's trunk routes, could go on to Bowditch, one block east of Telegraph. And we could actually relocate a stop outside of Crossroads, the student dining area. And we really, the impetus for this was looking at what the bus did when street fairs happen. So on some Saturdays and every single Saturday in the month of December, actually, Telegraph Avenue gets shut down for a street fair where vendors come out and sell their wares, and the bus gets rerouted onto Bowditch. So next slide. And we thought that this actually might benefit AC Transit if you sacrifice a little bit of route efficiency and timeliness for coming closer to where students live. So here you can see that moving the stop 1 block east actually brings it into very close proximity to some of the densest agglomeration of dormitories in the South Side, making line 6 probably the most appealing way for students to get to downtown Berkeley. However, we looked at some data provided by AC Transit and found that the reroute actually added 5 minutes onto of delays onto the bus line.
No, it didn't add 5 minutes. It just, on a lot of the times we looked at it, moved it up from, around 2 minutes, moving from Dwight to Bancroft to sometimes up to 5, which any significant delay was not okay with us. So we kind of scrapped that plan.
Right. And, a big part of scrapping this plan was also that one of the 2 major motivators for us for this advocacy, besides wanting to seek a very quality public space, was also about sustainability. So after this, last month, we came out with option 5 instead. So we named it option 5 because Public Works their approach to public outreach was to present a set number of options for every single street to the public and basically ask members of the public, out of all of these options, which ones do you prefer? Essentially have people, press a button saying, out of all of them, I like this one the best. So for Telegraph Avenue, there were 4 options, none of which actually filtered out private automobiles. So in response, we came up with what we're calling option 5. Oh, next, is the slide changing? It seems to be. Okay, so these are existing conditions, as you know. At their narrowest, the sidewalks are only 10 feet of right-of-way, and then you have very, very wide car lanes and also metered parking on both sides of the street. And each block is about 60 feet in length. So, 300 feet in length and then 60 feet in width. So this is the block from Bancroft to Durant. You can see a disproportionate amount of space is allocated to cars. Next slide. So in having in having our advocacy be really focused around climate change, our main theory of, I guess, the relationship between transit and sustainability is that people don't choose driving because they don't care about global warming. They choose driving because our cities are structured to make driving the most rational, if not the only choice available to people. So in addressing that really broken system of incentives, we should be looking at how to make transit quicker, safer, and more appealing, and frankly, increase the costs associated with driving, particularly the amount of time it takes to drive to a location. The main line of thought being, if you are driving to Southside Berkeley, one of the densest neighborhoods in the Bay Area, it's not reasonable to have the expectation that you should be able to swiftly drive to the store that you're patronizing, park, and then be able to walk the width of a sidewalk to immediately where you want to go. It just shouldn't be that easy. Next slide. So our option 5 design really tried to mediate the desire to filter out private cars while still allowing businesses to have a way to do their commercial loading, load their vegetables in the morning, get their used books in, all the sort of stuff that businesses need to do to exist in a physical world. So what we did is we decided to basically implement a bus lane that ran along the center of the street that filtered off cars starting at Hayes Street. Southside is 4 blocks long from Bancroft to Dwight, but Dwight is a one-way street that runs east. There's some other plan views that show this traffic pattern better with all these one-way streets. but we wanted to reroute cars on Haste, and then starting Haste northward, only buses can run on the bus lane. However, implicitly, commercial loading vehicles could use the bus lane to access loading zones on the upper plan that you could see with the hatched mark areas. Those would be flat areas that commercial vehicles could pull over to, do their loading, and leave in the mornings or evenings. So next slide.
And just quickly, the cool thing is when they're not doing their loading, that we'd be able to use those spaces. I mean, vendors would be able to use those spaces, and they wouldn't be taking up sidewalk space that that students are using. And yeah, and all that green space there as well is parklet, a parklet zone, which is really, there is no space for that in the current design of the street. So when we're talking about a public realm, all of that space there that's in green has the potential for all sorts of public realm activity.
So this is the section view of what it would look like. In the middle, you see an 11-foot wide bus lane and very, very generous sidewalks in a public realm. So you would have 16-foot wide sidewalks with an 8.5-foot parklet that can have street furniture or vegetation, very much inspired from Mackenzie's design. And then some of that space would also be just flat ground where vehicles could pull over and discreetly load their whatever they need to load. So next slide. So in a little bit more detail, this is what something along those lines could look like, where you really have very, very attractive street urban design features, such as bioswales, planting, native vegetation, and then you have in the kind of brick pattern, those flat areas that could be used for commercial loading. And then also really adorned by the landscaping is the bus lane itself, which from more of a symbolic and kind of design point of view is really, really celebrated and championed by being placed in the middle of the street as a way to really signal that transit is very much the priority of the street and of the city's values, really. So next slide. Here's a little bit of a perspective view of what that could look like. And below is a plan view that shows a little bit of how design and urban design can be used to influence the behavior of drivers. So from my experience, I drive, and I don't think of myself as someone who is pro car, but I drive just because I have a car and I can, and it's actually the easiest way to get around. And if I lived closer to campus and if I could afford to, I wouldn't. But anyway, the idea behind our design is that cars driving in Southside would not choose to violate the dedicated bus lane because they wouldn't see the ability to pull off into those flat commercial loading areas. And it's a little bit hard to see, it's a little bit small, my apologies for that. But landscaping and design features could be used to basically block out the perspective of those flat loading areas. So drivers, when either, for example, driving on a cross street on Haste or driving northbound on Telegraph, hitting that the area where cars begin to get filtered out, don't even see the ability for them to pull off into anywhere. And they would basically, someone would have to make the decision that I'm just gonna, go crazy and drive on the bus lane all the way up, which is very unlikely. And drivers, tend to make split-second decisions. So our design really keeps in mind, how do drivers behave in those 5-second decision windows?
And then there's also the possibility, which we've explored time and time again, obviously, the bollard plan, it goes all the way back to that of tractable bollards as a design possibility. That basically, right now, AC Transit is currently getting its buses ready to be able to interact with traffic signals on Telegraph. They're doing improvements. It's not bus rapid transit, but it's kind of a rapid bus kind of overhaul on Telegraph. So we think that's an opportunity to maybe allow them to use retractable bollards at the entrances here. If it ever becomes a problem where cars are actually trying to use the right of way, that's there. And I think that's a design feature that makes it very clear that this space is for transit. But the design features to prevent that in the first place are also a totally suitable option, obviously.
Next slide.
Sorry, 1 second. Ooh. God, it was on it for a second. I really don't know what's going on here. I really apologize, everyone. There we go.
So yeah, here's another perspective view of how having a raised street not only would help filter out cars from that northbound perspective, but would actually also have the benefit of slowing cars down as they drive through intersections. So this is the intersection of Channing, which is the two-way street in the middle of Southside that runs east-west with Telegraph. And so as a car, you'd be approaching the intersection, and then the raised shared street would be lifted up from the street grade, and cars would drive over that, kind of signaling that you are entering into pedestrian space. You should slow down, and then you descend back from that, and then you'd be able to speed up again. And then at the same time, again, you could see that the role that streetscaping and vegetation can play in kind of signaling that you're not able to make a left turn, in addition to signage, obviously, too. Next slide.
Oh yeah, just quickly, another note on that is the city's design option 4, which we showed the cross section for earlier, which is the one that's the preferred alternative that's being presented to council this month. It also does include, I mean, obviously it's all on sidewalk level, all flush, still allowing cars, but it does include the raised graded intersections, which is just another reason why it'll be important to get that through so that we're able to build a car-free implementation on top of that. I mean, this is going to be a really important design feature.
So part of the limitations of working in the real world is that Public Works has said again and again is they're dealing with a very limited $8 million budget from MTC. So that can only go so far, and regrading a street is actually very expensive because they would have to redo the sewage lines underneath the street. So here we're saying that if you have to choose which blocks to regrade, the city should be prioritizing the northernmost blocks that are the most pedestrian utilized, and then move southward from that. The city should also include a raised bus stop for people accessing the bus if we were to have the bus drive on a curbless street environment, and the raised grade should be used also to filter out cars once they approach Hayes Street. And for anyone who isn't familiar with the South Side, this diagram also shows the one-way traffic directions on the various east-west streets.
Yeah, and the reason we chose Haste rather than Dwight, I mean, we were interested in Dwight in the first place, but Chuck from Walk Bike Berkeley initially and some other folks as well pointed out that Haste is the one that points towards downtown. And actually there's a sign at Haste and Telegraph right now that actually points you, if you want to go to the Telegraph area, you continue on Telegraph. But if you want to go to downtown Berkeley, it doesn't direct you to go down Bancroft like a lot of people might think. It actually directs you to go down Haste. That's where the city wants you to go circulation wise. So it's already how we're trying to get people to operate. It's just, I mean, this would be implementing it so people actually do go down Haste and they don't go down Telegraph, because I mean, most people going down Telegraph are not stopping. They're just adding to congestion and taking Bancroft, which is actually going to have one lane once we redesign, once all of these redesigns go through. So we think Haste is the best place to reroute out of all the options.
So guys, I know you, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting comments and discussions. So do you guys want to kind of try to wrap it up a little bit?
Yeah, we're almost done here, Brandon.
Yep.
Can you go to the next slide, Sam?
There we go.
So you might have noticed by now that one of the conspicuously missing elements from our design are cycle tracks or bike lanes. And part of our reasoning for not including them is, first of all, if commercial vehicles would be accessing loading zones via the bus lane, we would not want them to have to cross over a bike lane. And second of all, our theory of how we can have this balance between programmed bus lane space and shared space is that cyclists and pedestrians actually effectively intermix if you give them enough space. And this is something that you see if you walk on campus. especially on Sproul Plaza, is cyclists and pedestrians passing by each other, moving up, say, their lane. So we feel that this is a design that includes even wider sidewalk space, which would have 21 feet of sidewalk space. And if given that much right of way, you could have pedestrians and cyclists intermix very effectively with porosity, with automobile filtering out, bollards in between. Next slide. Okay, so thanks for sitting through all of that. We've learned a heck of a lot from this process. And well, I guess before we go to that, just quickly, this is what the keystone of our design would be, which is you're approaching as a driver a street, and you have signage and design elements that would encourage you to, or force you to turn left. So that's really, you know, the centerpiece of our design. But anyway, Sam, if you want to share kind of some of what we've learned.
Yeah, sure. So I've got, I guess, three main takeaways I wanted to mention here. And this is just after, once again, this has been a very, very fast-paced process so far. I mean, we don't foresee it ending anytime soon, though. I mean, once again, it's going to have to be a separate directive. It's not going to be technically within the Southside Complete Streets Plan. So the timeline of implementing a car-free telegraph is kind of uncertain, and that's why we need to continue fighting for it. But in the time we've had in these last couple months, I guess the first thing we've learned is that the political situation is much different than it was 10 years ago. And I think a lot of people have also made that observation, rather than, you know, lots and lots of, you know, people against even a bus lane going down Telegraph, coming out to public meetings. It's just dozens of students coming out and saying enough is enough. We want our space back. The second thing is that bureaucracy is still a barrier, and funding is a barrier. And, you know, it's unfortunate that a process like this has to be constrained by those barriers, but there are ways to work around them. And that's what we're doing right now. And it's Public Works specifically that recommended to the Transportation Commission that the way to do this is have it be a separate council directive. So there are ways around this, and we're kind of working through all of that right now. And then third is organizing gets the goods. I mean, this would not have happened if we weren't organizing and people didn't turn out. Really, people didn't turn out. We would not be in the political situation we are today if folks like Walk Bike Berkeley weren't organizing. I mean, really, organizing gets the goods, and that's why the political situation is a lot different than it has been in the past. I mean, that's it for my takeaways. Brandon, Mackenzie, you got anything?
Yeah, I'll share some of what I've observed. The first is that it's very difficult to convince people that it's a good idea to take away parking. I'm sure that every architect who's had to deal with an ADU has dealt with that. Well, I guess that's not taking away parking. You just don't give an off-street parking space. But people perceive losses much more than they perceive potential gains, is the major psychological takeaway. The second is that there's an interesting tension in planning between the impulse to better serve the status quo versus the desire to design a city that embodies our values, principles, and aspirations. And through this process, we really, really learned the extent to which, even in the city of Berkeley, the planning department and planning as a profession is really, really designed to better serve the status quo, which, as we know, as young people, as anyone concerned with climate change, is absolutely not acceptable. And we think that planning can do a better job of editorializing a little bit, but also responding to the pressures of people who are really pushing for more dramatic and progressive change. Lastly, the internet can be a very effective mobilizing tool. This entire movement has pretty much happened over Zoom. What we do is we make drawings, we put it out there in the internet, we get people hyped up, and then we convince them to attend Zoom meetings. And surprisingly, that has really, really changed the scope of what's possible in City Hall. So we're hoping that, you know, now that people are in person, we're going to hold a protest event in early March where we actually shut down the street and practice guerrilla urbanism, and just try and get people activated with posters and more in-person events. So keep on the lookout for those.
Yeah, Mackenzie, do you have anything before we are finished here?
I'll just keep it short, but I just want to echo what you guys have already said, but definitely just being able to involve students and kind of getting the word out to other organizations and people who these you know, a lot of people, everyone uses the street and everyone walks through the street, but people kind of underlook it as something that could be changed just because it seems so big and it seems so like difficult to do. But in reality, it definitely has a very big effect, especially in a sustainable aspect and in a community engagement aspect. So just being able to, you know, provide more awareness to this cause.
Great. Well, thank you all. It's a really fantastic presentation. I imagine I can't be the only person here who's blown away. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. I've got plenty to talk about, but I think I'll open it up first and see if anybody has any questions or comments to start.
Well, I'll jump in mainly because of my enthusiasm for this. I know this project and I know Sam a little bit, and so impressed with what you all have done here. Very supportive, very enthusiastic about this project. I had an interesting day. I took a bike ride. I went down Milvia to see some of the hardscape there and some of the hardscape that's been removed, actually, unfortunately. And I took a turn and came up Telegraph to take a look at that because I knew there was going to be this presentation. Just before this, I was in a economic development committee meeting in Albany where you know, the businesses just their mantra is they can't get enough free parking, and it just kills me. And we did a survey. I don't know if anyone's been down to Lower Solano, but where we put in all these parklets and used up parking space and street space and brought people out in the street. People were, they did a survey. People were overwhelmingly enthusiastic about getting out in the street and getting into these parklets and getting onto the sidewalks. And I just think that this is, you know, this is where people want to be. They want to be mingling. They want to have community. I was a little bit worried about buses when I first saw this plan. I actually was, though, prepared to say, you know, definitely screw the cars, but, you know, maybe the buses, maybe we should keep the buses and the bikes out and just have people on the street. But very impressed with your ability to, your designs for accommodating the buses and perhaps also accommodating the bicyclists there as well. And let's see, what else did I want to say? Let's get this done. This is great. I'm looking forward to changes like this. And you're so right about the status quo, but keep on yelling, keep on fighting. And I love the fact that you're thinking of some guerrilla action. All power to you.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm gonna see if we can find that Lower Solano survey and point to that as, you know, some useful data about the fact that people want to see this. So thanks.
Yeah, I can try to get that to Sam.
John and James, you got something to say?
Yeah, hey, this is John Camp and James Rojas. That was a great, what's up? That was a great presentation. You guys are doing like graduate level work or maybe postgraduate level work. So that was pretty awesome. So anyways, that was awesome to see. I'm a landscape and urban designer, facilitator,
transportation planner,
and we do a lot of community engagement. Anyways, my question, so we're very familiar with the problems with community engagement. We just wrote a book that's coming out at the end of the month called Dream, Play, Build, and it's about rethinking community engagement and how we do that with our hands and senses. So this is something that we're familiar with, and how they presented 4 options, and we're like, just pick the option that you like, and you guys came up with option 5, which I thought was great. Have you had a chance to to present that to the city? And if so, what have been the responses?
You want to take that, Brandon?
Sure, yeah. So basically what happened is we put together this option 5 plan because the way that Public Works was going about their public outreach process was through pigeonholing people's opinions, basically. So if someone said, we want a car-free design, the closest thing that comes to that is option 4, then Public Works would take that information and say, you know, in the next Transportation Commission meeting, our outreach indicated that people most prefer option 4. And I think part of that is that these are Public Works people who focus on infrastructure, and they didn't necessarily, you know, go to maybe like graduate planning programs where they teach about, you know, community engagement and, you know, design shreds and all that sort of stuff. But regardless about that background, it really indicated to us how much public outreach is emphasized so that those city staff people can make their presentation to the city council and be able to give those slides where they say, we did this huge outreach campaign. We had X amount of survey takers. We did X amount of meetings. So that's really like the biggest motivation for them for doing the public outreach, is just so they can say they did it. And, you know, that alone probably wouldn't have influenced the outcome too much. So in response to that, we made option 5, and we really use that to post on the internet and get people, you know, super psyched. And then we also shared that with city council members over email. We haven't met with any besides District 7 City Council member Robinson. But I would say the most it's actually done is when we shared it with the principal transportation planner from Public Works, actually directly. And he responded to us and he said, we really appreciate your work. And actually, we're going to ask our fire department if this could work. He shared it with another Public Works person, and they asked us questions. How would FedEx work? What about double parking the lane? So I actually think that its biggest impact so far has been really pushing the planners when we talk to them directly to push the envelope of possibility and try to feel like, you know, they have more leeway to be more progressive in their designs.
Yeah, I mean, that's great to hear. And just having worked as a city planner for a large bureaucracy, so worked for the city of Los Angeles for 2.5 years. For you guys, I mean, I think it's worth doing just so you can see how things work on the inside, and you can see what the constraints are firsthand. Because the culture within those environments is very much about not rocking the boat. And so change generally doesn't come from within those environments, which you guys are discovering. So precisely what you guys have done, it's awesome, because if you have advocates pushing from the outside, you have advocates influencing politicians, that they can push down on planners and kind of give them the marching orders to do these kinds of things. Otherwise, it's very hard for individual planners to, you know, kind of stick their neck out and do something that's maybe against the grain, because you kind of get whacked back. You do that within that environment. But anyways, great job, guys. Thanks for answering my question. Yeah, hope to see some changes here.
Thanks so much for your question.
And it's nice seeing both of you after. I mean, I think the last time was Environmental Design 1, Denny's class. I remember.
Oh, you were in that class.
In that class, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. When we did the mural boards and everything. Yep. Okay, cool. Nice. Awesome. All right. Well, good to see you again.
Just a note for the rest of our participants, in the next few months here, we're going to have John and James on to talk about their new book. So we'll look for that. Look for that coming up. Anybody else want to chime in?
Hey guys, co-chair Tyler Kovic here. I have a quick question about other advocates that maybe you've canvassed or that you plan to canvass to support your case. Have you all met with, or maybe, and I could have missed this in the presentation, have you met with any business owners that are really behind your plan, especially on the ends or on the edge of haste, that could help advocate for you at City Council and see this as rather than being a problem for parking or an issue for their business, but actually being a boon for their business?
Sam, do you want to get this one?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, to Charlie in the chat, we've actually been in conversation. We actually had a meeting with AC Transit staff and specifically with Director Walsh organizing it, Director Walsh is very interested in, and this is her district, in a car-free telegraph as the future, and obviously getting down a bus lane of any sort right now as well. But with regards to canvassing businesses, we haven't done that yet, but that's definitely on our short list of things to do in the future. And I mean, I don't know that that'll happen before the city council meeting. But I mean, it just, you know, as the city is kind of voting on, you know, option 4, I think the questions we might ask will change. And I guess this has all moved really quickly. All of this happened during our midterms and finals really last semester. So we're kind of expanding now and trying to get more feet on the ground in terms of folks who can help us do stuff like that. Is there anything I missed there, Brandon? Because I mean, basically that's something we're interested in doing. We just have not, had it as a priority yet, given our resources.
Yeah, which organizations would you say have been most helpful in working with us in building coalition?
Yeah, so I Walk Bike Berkeley has been really helpful, very helpful. EBTRI, Speak Transit Riders Union, and I've talked to Dave Campbell from Bike East Bay constantly. I mean, we met on Telegraph recently and discussed some other considerations he's been very helpful in terms of bringing stuff up we didn't really think of in the first place, like possibly allowing double parking on Haste and Dwight to compensate for lost parking, which could be interesting for TNCs, for like Uber, DoorDash, etc. So, yeah, I mean, it's not just us that has made this possible at all. I mean, it's really Walk Bike Berkeley, BNHCA, Berkeley Neighbors for Housing and Climate Action, Ben Gold's very helpful. It's been a collaborative effort.
Great, thanks for the response. It's just, if you had a few businesses who were going to be on the exact corridor, who were business owners who were able to stand up at that presentation with you and in city council, that I think they would have a very strong voice and be helpful to the advocacy platform. And they're not just advocates; they're actually people, paying into the city coffers.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
You mentioned there was a car-free during the holidays. There was a car-free event, and my son actually works at Mo's Books, which is on the corridor there. And so I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, we got a lot more traffic on that day." And of course you would. And so it's so strange to me that businesses are opposed to this sort of thing when it would just benefit them so much. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox and let someone else talk.
I mean, Pearl Street and Church Street and all these walkable converted streets in these small college towns are highly successful, and the spaces for businesses, especially in the ends of those walkable streets, are super coveted.
That's precisely, like, those are the exact examples we've been using this whole time.
Yeah. I lived for a decade in Burlington, and Church Street is super vibrant.
I could just share that at the most recent public meeting we had, there was a famous or infamous Berkeley landlord named Ken Sarachin, who owns a couple record stores on the street. And, he gave a little bit of this like inaccurate depiction of, economic decline and the hollowing out of the CBD of Telegraph Avenue, this like half-century, outdated narrative. But it's like your businesses aren't going away because, it's harder to drive there. It's because people get their music from the internet now, man. Like, so it's very much, I think, the perspective of a certain generation really, coming out and being voiced by TBIT as a whole.
Yeah, all at State Street to Madison to that as well, where I did my undergraduate. And Ben, my absolute all-time favorite background, Lebbeus Woods. You wanna say something?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to kind of commend these guys for, first of all, thank you guys for a great presentation and then the work you're doing. It's really great to see that finally these ideas, at least from my perspective, are being kind of brought to the fore. You know, someone coming from Europe, I have to say, you know, I was just really always floored how cars take over our lives, and how pedestrians are just in general like pushed back. And give you an example, like 25 years ago, I was desperately looking for a pedestrian street in San Francisco, and there was only one. And I don't know if how many of you know which one is that. And I kept going there whenever I got homesick. That it's Belden Place in San Francisco, but it was the only street with outdoor dining, believe it or not. And thanks to the pandemic, now we're finally sort of reinvented dining, but outdoor dining. Well, what I'm trying to say is that it's possible to reclaim the space back from the cars, and you know, you guys are doing it. And last question for you, and kind of take it broadly. Have you researched any examples worldwide in your research? And, you know, are there any good ones that came up? Just wondering, you know, Barcelona, for example, the city of Barcelona is doing something very similar, although in the residential neighborhoods, not in the commercial districts, and they've been very successful at it. So I was just curious.
I mean, I think super blocks have been like a big inspiration for everything. I mean, obviously they don't necessarily have buses going down them, but the idea of choosing what to let into the street and what not to on a theoretical level is definitely behind what we're doing here. I mean, also for retractable bollards, I believe Cambridge has retractable bollards in the UK, and it's pretty common for high streets to have them. And just generally, I think there are a lot of car-free high streets as well in the UK. And they're obviously very successful. So, but yeah, Barcelona, you got it. I mean, that's the kind of philosophy we've got.
Yeah, hopefully this conversation kind of expands the bounds of this small section of Telegraph Avenue and just to a kind of a larger conversation. But thank you again, appreciate it.
Hey guys, I have just a comment to make. First, incredible presentation. Thank you for making that, and I hope your proposal goes through well with the city. And secondly, part of our work, I've been working to make 3D digital twins of cities, and I've been curious from an experiment point of view, if creating a digital twin of the city of Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, and creating SimCity-like features on top of the city could help engage the public in urban planning policy by effectively giving them the tools to start to play around with the cities and craft what they wanted to see out of that. I was curious your guys' opinions on doing something like that for Berkeley, and perhaps using that as a tool to present to the city. It's incredible technology, and one that really helps immerse people around the ideas.
I'm really interested in digital technologies as a means of participation. And I feel like something as immersive as that is easily something to be interested in. What's your initial reaction, to that, Brandon?
Yeah, I was thinking before, like if we can have option 5 in like a super bare bones VR 3D model, just to like have people be able to better visualize what a more pedestrianized telegraph could look like, that could be like super duper effective. Because, I think just saying like get cars off the street, people, once again, like people perceive losses more than they perceive gains. But if you show them what the street could look like, then that could be really helpful.
Yeah, I just put a link in the chat for everybody. It's designwindsor.com. We tried to do the same thing for Windsor and Detroit to kind of excite the public in urban planning policy. And it's a very early concept. It's more pretty than it is functional at the moment. We built it in Unreal Engine. And now I'm starting to get curious about, how do we start to put civic data layers into the map? And then how do we give people design tools to start to design on top of the city themselves, from like just people, just regular everyday people who say, hey, I have an idea for my city. I want to express that idea and present it in an incredibly professional manner. So yeah, I just put that in the chat, take a look, and if you guys are interested, I'd love to work with you guys on this.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. Could you send me your email?
Yeah, I'll put it here as well. We
Thanks so
have
much.
a number. Yeah, thank you guys. You guys are the ones that really pushed it forward. We have a number of data science students from UC Berkeley that are joining us, and our big question is, where do we get civic data from when it comes to like Berkeley, Oakland, and San Francisco? And like anytime we try and chat with the city, it's just a no-go. So we're like, where do we get data from to like traffic data, density data, pedestrian data, all the zoning data, all these kind of things. And could this data be used to help simulate the outcome and effects of urban design?
Yeah, that's a super dope project. I'll reach out. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
James, I see that your digital hand is raised.
Yeah, I think you did a great job. I'm an ex-transportation planner, and I worked a lot in Los Angeles on a lot of bike and ped projects. I also do a lot of community advocacy work, and I think one of the things with streets is really telling the story of how does the street feel to people. Like when we did that workshop, in Denny's class, that's how to engage people, by feeling and emotion. How did childhood memory, play out in Telegraph Street? Because now people are engaged because of memory, need, and aspiration, and now they're in. And I think that's what would be really fun to do workshops, to really talk about memory and place and how the streets feel for people. Therefore, the feeling is driving the process rather than just infrastructure. Because I think a lot of planning fails because they just think about infrastructure as being, we need to do this, but people see that as a feeling and emotion, and really capturing those and really help your campaign to have a broader audience and really kind of make that story of the city. And I think that'd be really great. Also, I've done a lot of interactive models of streets. I just did one for Columbus Avenue, 40-foot long model. We just move things around. And what happens when people use models and objects, they create their imaginary places, and they create these imaginary things, as opposed to just surveys, which surveys are very kind of black and white, more crosswalks, more street trees. When people use their hands, they'll be creating beer gardens, fountains, zoos, all kinds of things. And you want to collect all these crazy ideas, and just so the city, this is a potential here. We have 50 crazy ideas that you want to put on the street. Then they can see how valuable it is. So right now they just see it as this kind of just an infrastructure project. You got to really make it more of a lifestyle project. So yeah, if you need any help, I'd be glad to help you guys. Run some workshops and show how to do the workshops we did in Denny's class, and just get more people engaged.
I'd be really interested in that. I'm honestly actually unrelated, but a massive fan of your work, James. I've actually, since I read something of yours in one of my first classes at Berkeley, weirdly enough. So this is a lot of fun, but that I'm really interested in that as a way to envision what the public realm could look like and what parklets could look like when this design is actually being implemented, and we might actually get in contact with you on that, because that's exactly the kind of outreach. Because a big emphasis of ours is this is not just a circulation project; this is a public realm project. So I really, really appreciate all of that.
I put the link to our book into the chat apropos to that, and if you want the discount code, just get in touch with us and we can give you a discount code so you don't have to pay full price.
James, I just want to pick up on that too, because I think that to me, and I meant to introduce this whole event by saying that one of the first things I noticed when I first moved to the Bay Area, after the fact that California has decided to educate a majority of its children in trailers, is that Telegraph Avenue is terrible. I spent 5 years in Madison. I lived on State Street, which is kind of the equivalent. It's about twice as long, but it could be similar. It's like the student zone. It connects the Capitol to the university. There's buses and bikes. They allow cabs and delivery trucks, but it's primarily students. And I think the thing that most impressed me about the presentation is that the understanding that, allowing buses and even allowing some delivery trucks doesn't preclude the kind of things that you want to do, because they're so infrequent. Even a 5-minute headways on buses, it's like you can walk across that street so easily. It's essentially a public pedestrian realm that people just have to watch out for a little bit every once in a while when they want to cross the street, right? And I think so. I mean, I think your presentation was impressive in a lot of ways, but I think the recognition that including buses will do things for the street that moving them off the street wouldn't do, and also not affect the street in the negative ways that, you know, someone who says, oh, we just want a pedestrian street, you know, might gravitate towards. So I think that's amazing. And all of which is to say that, like, there's a whole, you know, you've got decades now of graduates of Berkeley who are living in the area who have these memories, right? And to utilize that to change the street in a way that all students probably inherently at some level know could be better, to make those changes, I think it'd be amazing. And I mean, to be honest, like, it just floors me that it hasn't happened yet. Like, I can't believe it's 2022 and it's still like this, right? Like, it's crazy. So anyways, anybody else want to chime in?
I don't have a question in particular, but I just wanted to make a comment about the thought process that went into your design, like starting with the bottom-up approach. You know, like, you started talking about the texture on the streets, like how people interact on the street, like, you know, the experiences on the streets before you went on to, like, you know, the aerial views and the plan view, you know, using the lines. I think it's very important. I think maybe that's kind of like the discrepancy between, you know, empathetic urban designers and people who work in, you know, in the authority, where they're the ones who approve plans. And, you know, it's like we think about the experience on the street, and, you know, I think like those people are looking more from, like, you know, from like top to bottom. You know, they want people to get quickly to where they're going. They want to ease traffic. You know, they're just thinking in lines, in 2D lines. But we are thinking, you know, we are thinking in the direction of, like, how do people experience these spaces? Like, when I got to the Bay Area, like 6 months, about 7 months ago now. And I used to live in Ann Arbor. And it was even after I left Ann Arbor that I realized that, oh my God, like, I think I read a report where they said Ann Arbor is one of the best cities to live in. Like, I didn't have a car. I was a graduate student, and, like, I never felt stressed out when I'm outdoors. Like, you can easily walk to where you're going, and even while you're working, like, it's just, when I look back, I'm like, life was just easy as a pedestrian. But when I got to the Bay Area, I feel like, you know, there was a time I actually got into one of the buses, that's one of the buses that, you know, the Tri-Valley, I think it's called the Tri-Valley Transit. And then I got down at it's called the Santa Rita bus stop. And then, like, there was no sidewalk. So, like, I was just there on the street, and I was confused, you know, like, that stress. And I was like, okay, I know this place was well planned, like the roads, the traffic lights, but, like, how did they miss this opportunity? Like, how did they think about, like, what is the experience of the pedestrian when she gets down from the bus and, like, she's trying to cross the road or whatever? So, like, I think that, you know, when people are too far from the actual experience on the street, then it's not easy for them to make decisions or to even do good design. So, like, maybe we have more designs, you know, like, even introducing the VR, like, let people experience, let those people who are going to make decisions, like, experience it, let them see, let them maybe almost feel it. Maybe then would actually have better streets.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ife. I actually have a funny story about the disconnect between coming from on the ground experience, kind of coming into conflict with the planner's perspective. And this happened when I was talking to the transportation planner, saying, we actually think that cyclists and pedestrians can intermix if they have enough space. And the reason why is because we're looking at the campus itself, where this actually happens every day. And then the planner responded and he said, no, they don't intermix. that area on campus is a dismount zone for cyclists. And I was like, what? I bike on it like every single day. And then I realized it's because as a planner, as a transportation planner, you look at things only through policy and bullet points and maps, and not through how people actually use the space as a human interacting with your perception and your wants and your needs. And there's no police saying get off your bike, but that's how the planner sees it, right? So that was an interesting experience, and kind of seeing those things come to conflict.
Yeah, that's why we need sensory-based transportation planning. Based on our senses rather than just on destination and time, because that's what ruins it. Planners just think about destination, time, and cost, and not about experience.
Yes, yeah, no, totally. It's been a very interesting experience seeing how those different incentives are very much at odds, and how no one is really advocating for the public realm. So I'm hoping that Sam, Mackenzie, and I stepped in and at least help people think about that a little bit.
And I've been curious for a long time because Detroit, Windsor, which is across from Detroit, and now here in the Bay Area, I've been curious why there's such a disconnect between municipal politics, urban planning, and the building departments. And then, of course, what the community wants. And you guys are really advocating for the community. And I've always been curious, why is city councils so opposed to hearing from their community? It might be better in Berkeley, but I've been in meetings in Detroit and then across the river in Windsor, and they hate hearing from their public. They think they're fools. And I've always wondered why, because the public's the ones that are experiencing the design.
I mean, I think that Berkeley is uniquely poised to be the counterweight to that. I mean, we're not perfect, but we have a pretty deep tradition of civic participation, and in the planning process especially, it's really apparent. From my understanding, I'm new here. I've lived here for less than 2 years, but I can already see that we like to take a long time to do things, but do them right, basically, after lots and lots of civic participation. So that's, but once it gets to 2022 and we've still got cars on Telegraph, we feel that that's too long and it's time to act.
you can study for so long.
Nick, I feel like your background might have a little bit to add to that discussion.
Oh, sorry. Did you call my name?
Yeah. I just it seems like you might have a little bit to add to those ideas.
Oh, about public, the council, public and council interactions.
Yeah.
It's always what can I tell you? There are people who are on councils, people who are empowered, who just do have the idea that the public dealing with public input is something they have to do and something they're not very happy about. And there's the more enlightened public officials, and hopefully I have been one who really tries to listen and to make it a big part. One thing that I've seen is when public officials or staff, actually, this happens with staff a lot, because a lot of times staff, they just really want to do their job. The public input really burns some staff, and I've seen them try to railroad through things without trying to do that public outreach. And what I see is that always backfires, because people don't like to be surprised.
Yeah.
And they come up with, they get the project comes through, and they and people are surprised, and then there's just blowback. And then whereas if they had brought people in all along, I mean, I think it really has to be a dialogue. It has to be a process between the public and the city and the officials and the staff. I loved hearing some of what I heard before about just going to the planners and talking with them. I think when everyone's talking together, that's when you really can arrive at the best solutions.
Yeah, well, I think I've done over 1,000 workshops across the country with every demographic and every issue, and it's how you do your public outreach. You know, I always start by trying people to build their favorite child memory as a place as a way to kind of get people to know each other, trust each other, and diffuse all attention and get rid of all the expertise in the room. Because now we're all starting from the same experience or from our same experiences. And this really changes the whole communication process. At the end of it, people love each other and they want to be part of this whole thing. As opposed to most meetings, you go to it once, you never go back. They're horrible. You know, like I live in Rockridge, and I like my neighborhood, but I hate our meetings because people just get so angry in them, and it's like no fun. Who wants to be in an angry meeting? And that's how most planners run meetings. You're more like anger fest.
The real life is not the Berkeley side comment section.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, one thing I remembered is that as someone pointed out earlier, pictures worth 1,000 words. If you can show people what the change is going to be, if you can show them give them the experience in graphics, that's huge. If you do it in text and in talking, you're going to lose people. So, the more graphics, the more photos, the better.
Yeah, well, it's also getting people to understand what your relationship is to the built environment. Like a woman walking down the street, what's your body going through walking down that street? What's their relationship with that built environment? So I think it's very getting people to understand that you have a relationship with the built environment around you, and how do you articulate that? For example, if I ask people in LA or anywhere in the country how to improve transportation, they'll say more parking and less traffic. If I have them build it, they'll build trees, sidewalks, cafes, a whole different scenario. So it's how you engage people, what kind of tools you use, will get a certain kind of answer. So I think
I personally think planners and public works officials should be forced to walk the streets and to bike the streets. That should be a requirement of their job to have the experience.
Yeah, but yeah.
But I think, one of the things that presentation shows us is that we kind of reach the limitations of, the human experience, for lack of better, or human condition actually, where we're kind of just stuck with slides, words, how much gusto or bravado you have. And that's just kind of what we're stuck with as humans. And so hopefully maybe new technologies can help propel presentation ideas forward in greater ways.
And I also think that public works departments don't do a lot of outreach because since they're not going through CEQA, which requires outreach, they don't do it. Planning departments by law have to do outreach. Yeah, that's the law, right? But public works department, we're just working on sidewalks and streets. They don't do any outreach at all. They apply for funding, get these grants, and then build it. And they'll give people the option A, B, or C.
Yeah,
that's how they work.
Kind of like not so much like a screw the public type thing, but it's not in their interest to constantly involve the public because it costs more money for them at the end of the day, or perceivably costs them more money.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, I have to hop off. Thank you guys so much for that. Please send me an email, and then I might follow up as well. I think your guys are listed on the invite. So, but please send me.
Mike, I can put you guys in touch too. So, yeah. Well, I like any last thoughts here from any of our other guests before we wrap it up.
Let's do a virtual workshop. Placement workshop for Telegraph. It'd be really fun.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, James, sounds like you're in connection with these guys already, so it'd be great. And I guess mostly I just want to thank the three of you for joining us tonight. I've been completely impressed by, not only just the work and the thoughtfulness and the level of interest and involvement in something that's, it's not even like, you're not even credit for this, right? This is just on the side. And it's fantastic, and it's long overdue and it's so disappointing to me that both like the City of Berkeley and the university itself and all the graduates of Worcester Hall over the last 50 years and it's still like this. And I guess I mostly want to end by like saying like, you know, what is it that we can do for you? Like how can we help you with this? And obviously there's a lot fewer people here now than there were previously, but I can pass that along. So if you have any closing thoughts that way, I'd love to hear them.
The email listserv. That would be the best way. If you ever have time to show up to a council meeting, say that you are a professional who works in bettering the environment that we use and live in every single day, and you really think that the city could, you know, think about Telegraph Avenue in a holistic way rather than just, you know, swiftly whisking people from point A to point B, or a way to ameliorate the concerns of businesses, you know, sign up for our listserv, go onto our website, and you'll see it there. So that way we can, you know, get in touch, and maybe even help use your expertise to better inform our argument to the city.
Great. Brandon, drop that email in the chat real quick too.
Yeah, so I mean, I've listed our website in the chat. It also has a full page with our option 5 on it as well. And I put our email down there if you want to get in contact with us. And we've also got a Twitter. We have a TikTok. Brandon started making TikToks for civic reasons, the quote black hole dance site or app as he calls it. But it's getting people out. So, you know, we're out there.
Nice. Mackenzie, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, probably just attending the City Hall meetings. I've been actually going to a lot of them. And
I'm so sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, they're pretty lengthy sometimes, but you know, being able to put forward a public comment is always helpful to show support.
Great. All right. Well, Mackenzie, Brandon, Sam, I just want to thank you all for joining us tonight. This has been really great. I've loved it. I know a lot of other people have, and we're looking forward to seeing where y'all take this and go from here.
Thank you so much, everyone. This has been wonderful.
Everyone for coming out.
Great.
Good job, guys. Thank you.
Have a good night, all.
Yeah.
Take care.